Hello! We are here to talk about books. Specifically, the books that I read in the month of March. March was reading month, and I had a great reading month. The books that I read this month were amazing. You are going to want to check out at least some of these, I swear to you. Outside of reading, it was one of the worst months of my life. But within the strict confines of reading books, I absolutely crushed it this month. Starting with Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I finished this book thinking in my head, oh my goodness, I am going to have to read every single Diana Wynne Jones book ever written, aren't I? And then I looked up how many books she's written, and I went, oh my goodness, that's a lot of books. And I backed away slowly. The second book that I read was My Struggle, Book 5 by Karl Ove Knausgaard. And yes, I'm definitely mispronouncing that last name. I'm so sorry, Karl Ove. Please forgive me. And that's all. The My Struggle series is a 6-volume autobiography about Karl Ove, and it is all about, as you have probably guessed, his struggle. And I'm guessing that his struggle is the fact that he decided to call his book series My Struggle when another author already called his book My Struggle, and that author was Adolf Hitler, who wrote Mein Kampf, which I have not read and will not be reading. Unlike this series by this Norwegian guy, which I am reading, which is called My Struggle, and I can't tell you why. I have no idea why. While we despise, detest, and hate all fascists and all Nazis, we don't share that same hatred for Karl Ove just because he's just a guy. He's just writing about himself. He's not a perfect dude, and he makes that very clear in his books, but also the way that he writes these books is so freaking enthralling, I can't stop. If you are considering checking out his books, I recommend specifically checking them out from the library. That's what I do. After that, I went and I watched Dune Part 2, or Toon, as I've been calling it. After that, I went to the library and I checked out Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert, and I did not finish it. I read about 2 chapters and I said, okay, I'm gonna just... Then I read Red Star Over the Third World by Vijay Prashad. You all know I'm a big Vijay Prashad fan, specifically for his little book called Washington Bullets, which I highly recommend. Red Star Over the Third World is not as good as Washington Bullets, but it is still a good little revolutionary communist book for little good revolutionary communists like myself. What did I read next, you ask? I checked out Castle in the Air by Diana Wynne Jones. This is the sequel to Howl's Moving Castle. It turns out it is a completely separate story from the story of Howl's Moving Castle. My understanding is that Howl and Sophie do show up eventually in the story, but I did not make it that far, which is odd, honestly. The book is a blast. It's funny. A lot of weird, zany, magical stuff happens. Everything was there for me to like this book. And what I ended up doing was skimming through paragraphs, and then I was skipping paragraphs, and then I was like, what am I doing if I'm not even bothering to read this book? Maybe I should just stop. And I am the kind of guy who stops a book if I'm not vibing with it. And I apologize for that. And then I picked up a book called The Sea by Iris Murdoch. The thing about this book is it is the exact opposite of Castle in the Air. This is a book that by all rights and by all means, I should not have liked. The book opens up with this old guy, and he spends his time describing what the sea looks like, going for a dip in the sea. It would sound like it's very boring, right? But I could not skip a single word. For some reason, I was hooked into this book. I was clawed in, and there was no escaping for me. What actually happens in this book is insane. Picture, if you will, a man who decides that there is an abusive relationship taking place, and he needs to split them apart. And his idea for doing that is to commit a kidnapping. It's freaking insane. This is one of the best books, I think, that I will probably read all year. Definitely check it out. Then I read My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that as well. She is an Italian author, and I only read about 30% of this book before I gave up on this one as well. It was really, really engaging at the start. It just hit a point where I don't know, it lost me or I lost it. That's a bummer. I am sorry. Then I read another Ann Tyler book. Last year I read like 4. I did all audiobooks for all of them. And this I did as an audiobook as well. It was The Accidental Tourist. And I actually almost gave up on this audiobook halfway through. I returned it to the library, and then I went and I got it back from the library because suddenly I really needed to know how it ended. But that's Ann Tyler's power. She just does that. The best Ann Tyler reading experience I've had was actually one of her newest books that she's written, which was called A Spool of Booth. A Spool of Blue Thread. Then I read Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. This was one of those books where such a strong start and pretty strong all the way through, and I love the concept of how it was written. It's like a bunch of short stories of different people in the town, and they all interact with Olive Kitteridge. But the book has a very disappointing ending. Two things in particular. These characters have this weird thing where they're just like a little bit anti-Muslim, and it just comes across as weird. Then, the very last chapter is a love story between a woman and a guy who is homophobic and therefore hates his daughter for being a lesbian, and then complains that his daughter doesn't like him. And the other character is like, "Oh, you're kind of disgusting. I can't be with you." And then the character is like, "You know what? Actually, I just need to pursue my happiness in this moment. So I'm gonna go with this guy who hates his own daughter just because she's a lesbian." And that really killed the book for me. Can't you just like your lesbian daughter? Is that so crazy? However, that said, the last book that I read, which I have on me, hold on. Folks, this book by this author, recommended to me by my wife, my personal wife, The Last Quarter of the Moon by Chu Zijian. This book is one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. Literally, the last day of March, I had like 200 pages of this book still to read. And I thought, I'm not going to finish it before March is over. And then I sat down and I just finished the entire thing because it's that good. Now, if you are in North America, you are going to have a really hard time getting this book like I did. It is probably not going to be in your local library, and it is not going to be available at your bookstores. This copy that I got from eBay, and it's from the UK. Now, I've looked it up, and there is a North American debut coming in November of this year. So you have a ways to wait unless you try to find it on some other sort of store like I did. This book is incredible. It is a story of an indigenous tribe in China, and it follows the lifespan of the narrator and all of the different characters in her tribe and all of the different stuff that they get up to, and it has some magic realism in it, which I love. For me, it is a blast to read this. It moves so quickly. It's so engaging. I felt like this book was a vacuum and it was sucking my eyeballs. That's the experience when you find this book and read it. I know for a fact that when November rolls around, I'm going to be reminding y'all to look for this book. I think that we need to hype this book up so much. I think this book needs to become huge. Genuinely huge. I read The Sea this month, and I thought, there's no topping that. That's one of the best books I've ever experienced. And then for this to follow right along like that, you need to be thinking about this one. Please, if you take nothing else from me, if you listen to nothing else that I've said, listen to this. This book right here is the only book that matters. It's all I can think about. This book ended and I genuinely felt depressed. I was sad that I couldn't keep reading this book. That's the kind of deranged power that this book has. My wife had the same experience. That's why she recommended this author and this book to me. It was actually really funny because the title in Chinese is very different from the English title. So my wife and I thought we were reading two different books by the same author, and it turns out that we were actually reading the same book. And then we were like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, this character, that character. If you're sitting here listening to me and you're thinking a book about an indigenous tribe in China sounds painfully uninteresting or sounds like not my style of book at all, stop it. Stop it right now. We need to blow this up. We need to make this the next big thing because this is the next big thing. I swear. I am so excited for the release in November. The last thing I'll talk a bit about is my progress in the One Piece manga. I believe I was on volume 67 at the end of February, and I have now just finished volume 72. I did struggle getting through the Fishman Island arc, but the arcs immediately following Fishman Island are so insanely good and so insane that I am right back into it. I am buckled in so hard right now. I keep reading these volumes and it won't stop getting more and more insane. Yeah, One Piece is cooking right now, so I won't be surprised if I report back next month and have read a lot of the volumes. That's it. That's all that I have in terms of the reading month. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Thank you for subscribing, if you did. Feel free to comment, recommend books, leave likes. Tune in next month to hear more of book If you want a sneak preview of what I'm reading this month, I got my struggle book 6 from the library, and look at how big this book is. It is over 1,100 pages. This is ridiculous.